The whistle, the front porch, the sheriff's smile, and a town where even small problems carried a lesson. The Andy Griffith Show became comfort television for millions. But time has taken many of those familiar faces away, turning that warm nostalgia into something bittersweet. Now, we revisit the cast and remember the stars who made Mayberry feel real. Andy Taylor was played by Andy Griffith at the age of 34. He was the calm, decent sheriff of Mayberry, a widowed father, a patient listener, and the kind of small-town lawman who solved most problems with common sense instead of force. His quiet style made the town feel safe without ever making him look weak. Griffith already had a strong stage and film background before Mayberry turned him into a television icon. A face in the crowd had shown he could play something much darker, while Matlock later gave him another long-running hit as a sharp old Southern lawyer with charm, patience, and a courtroom smile. Andy Griffith passed away in 2012 at the age of 86 after a heart attack. What still pulls people back to Andy Taylor is not just nostalgia, but the feeling of a quieter America. Porch talks, fatherly advice, fishing with Opie, and a kind of decency that feels rare now. Barney Fife was played by Don Knotts at the age of 36. He was Mayberry's nervous deputy. Proud, jumpy, overconfident, and usually one tiny mistake away from turning a small problem into a full police emergency. With one bullet in his pocket and too much confidence in his voice, Barney became pure small-town chaos. Knotts had already sharpened his anxious comedy style before Barney made him a legend. After leaving Mayberry, he carried that nervous brilliance into films like The Ghost and Mr. Chicken, then later found a new sitcom life on Three's Company as the ridiculous, scene-stealing landlord Mr. Furley. Don Knotts died in 2006 at the age of 81 after pulmonary and respiratory complications related to lung cancer. Barney Fife still works because underneath all the bragging and panic was a little man with a huge heart, desperate to matter, and that is why fans still love him. Aunt Bee Taylor was played by Frances Bavier at the age of 57. She was the warm soul of the Taylor house, the woman cooking supper, worrying over Opie, and giving Andy a home that felt steady after every quiet day at the courthouse. Aunt Bee had kindness, but she also had pride, opinions, and that familiar family way of fussing because she cared. Bavier's life around the role was not as soft as Aunt Bee's kitchen table. She came from serious theater work and carried herself more like a trained actress than a small-town aunt. Later, after years of being loved as Aunt Bee, she lived quietly in North Carolina, away from Hollywood noise, almost like she stepped out of TV and into her own private corner of Mayberry. She passed away in 1989 at the age of 86 after congestive heart failure. Aunt Bee's legacy is that feeling of home people still miss. Warm meals, gentle scolding, clean curtains, and someone in the house who made ordinary family life feel safe. Gomer Pyle was played by Jim Nabors at the age of 32. He was the sweet, wide-eyed gas station attendant who could turn one innocent golly into a whole scene. Gomer was simple without being empty, funny without being mean, and so full of trust that Mayberry felt a little kinder whenever he walked in. Well, what made Nabors surprising was the voice behind the goofy grin. The same man who played Gomer with soft country innocence could step on stage and sing in a rich baritone that caught people completely off guard. After Mayberry, Gomer Pyle, USMC made him a star in his own right, and his singing career gave audiences another side of him. Jim Nabors died in 2017 at the age of 87, after years of health problems. What he left behind was more than a catchphrase. Gomer became a piece of old TV innocence, the kind of character who believed people were good, even when the joke was on him. Goober Pyle was played by George Lindsey at the age of 35. He was Mayberry's goofy mechanic, Gomer's cousin, and the guy who could make a garage scene feel like front porch comedy. With his cap, grin, and loose country timing, Goober brought a more playful, slightly sillier rhythm into town. Lindsey fit naturally into that southern comedy lane. Goober followed him beyond the original show into Mayberry RFD and later Hee Haw, where the jokes, music, rural sketches, and country audience made him feel right at home. He did not need to reinvent himself. He leaned into the kind of humor people already loved him for. George Lindsey passed away in 2012 at the age of 83 after heart failure. Goober's legacy is not some grand dramatic moment. It is easy laughter, grease-stained garage jokes, and the comfort of a small town where even the silliest guy at the filling station had a place. Thelma Lou was played by Betty Lynn at the age of 34. She was Barney Fife's sweetheart, the kind, patient woman who somehow put up with his jealousy, bragging, and nervous little storms. Thelma Lou brought a softer glow to Mayberry, sweet without being silly, loyal without losing her own quiet dignity. Betty Lynn's connection to Mayberry lasted long after the cameras stopped rolling. She had acted in films and television before the show, but later in life she embraced the fans who still loved Thelma Lou. She even moved to Mount Airy, North Carolina, the town connected with Andy Griffith's real-life roots, and became part of the show's living memory. Betty Lynn passed away in 2021, at the age of 95, after a short illness. Thelma Lou's legacy is that gentle kind of TV romance, a smile across the room, a small-town date, and the feeling that even Barney Fife deserved someone who truly believed in him. Helen Crump was played by Annetta Corsott at the age of 29. She was Opie's schoolteacher and the woman who slowly became Andy Taylor's most important love interest. Smart, composed, and a little more modern than Mayberry's old rhythms, Helen brought a fresh, grown-up energy into Andy's quiet world. Corsott's career stayed closely tied to Andy Griffith, but she was never only Helen. She appeared in the classic horror film The Blob before Mayberry, then later returned to work with Griffith again on Matlock. Her screen presence always had that clear, steady quality, not loud, but firm enough to change the tone of a scene. Annetta Corsott died in 1995 at the age of 62 after cancer. Helen Crump remains part of Mayberry's later heart, the teacher who became family, the woman who gave Andy a real romantic future, and a reminder that even the calmest sheriff still needed someone beside him. Floyd Lawson was played by Howard McNear at the age of 55. He was Mayberry's gentle, fussy barber, the man with the soft voice, wandering thoughts, and a barbershop that felt like the town's unofficial gossip office. Floyd could make a simple haircut sound like the start of a very confused adventure. McNear's story behind the scenes was quietly moving. After suffering a stroke during the show's run, he returned to the series with limited movement, and the cast worked around him so Floyd could stay part of Mayberry. That says a lot about how much his odd, tender little presence mattered to the show. He passed away in 1969 at the age of 63 after complications from a stroke. Floyd's legacy is pure Mayberry texture, the slow barber chair talk, the half-finished thoughts, and that sweetly confused rhythm that made the town feel softer, stranger, and more real. Otis Campbell was played by Hal Smith at the age of 44. He was Mayberry's lovable town drunk, the man who would wander into the courthouse, lock himself in the cell, and somehow make public embarrassment feel harmless and funny. Otis was messy, sure, but the show treated him with a strange kind of small-town affection. Hal Smith had one of those voices that seemed to live everywhere in classic television. Beyond Mayberry, he worked heavily in animation and voice acting, turning up in countless cartoons and family shows. He also played Owl in Winnie the Pooh, giving him a second life with children who had no idea they were hearing the same man behind Otis. Hal Smith passed away in 1994 at the age of 77 after a heart attack. Otis leaves behind a very old TV kind of comedy, one that feels softer than it probably should, because underneath the joke was a lonely little man the whole town still chose to care about. Howard Sprague was played by Jack Dodson at the age of 35. He was the nervous county clerk with a stiff smile, a fussy manner, and the energy of a man who wanted life to stay carefully organized. Howard brought a more buttoned-up kind of awkwardness to Mayberry, especially when he tried to act adventurous and failed almost immediately. Dodson was not the loudest comic actor in the room, and that worked beautifully for Howard. His humor came from tiny discomforts, a pause, a polite panic, a look that said he was already regretting his decision. After the show, he stayed connected to the Mayberry world through later reunions and appearances, keeping that familiar nervous charm alive. Jack Dodson passed away in 1994 at the age of 63 after heart failure. Howard Sprague remains the town's anxious little reminder that not everyone in Mayberry was relaxed on the porch. Some people worried, overthought, and made awkwardness funny without ever needing to raise their voice. Clara Edwards was played by Hope Summers at the age of 58. She was one of Mayberry's nosy, proper town ladies, always ready for church events, local gossip, and little opinions that somehow traveled faster than the mail. Clara gave the town that familiar small community feeling, where everyone knew everyone, and privacy was mostly a rumor. Summers had the perfect face and voice for small-town television. She could play sweet, fussy, suspicious, or quietly judgmental without pushing too hard. Her career included many guest roles, but Clara felt like the kind of woman who had always lived in Mayberry, probably organizing something and correcting somebody at the same time. Hope Summers died in 1979 at the age of 77 after heart failure. Clara's legacy is that church social, neighborly, slightly meddling energy that made Mayberry feel full. She was not the center of town, but without women like her, the town would have felt a lot less alive. Emmett Clark was played by Paul Hartman at the age of 63. He was Mayberry's fix-it man, the quiet tradesman who could show up with tools, a dry face, and the kind of small-town practicality that kept daily life moving. Emmett was not flashy. He felt like the man people called when something broke and nobody wanted to make a fuss. Hartman came from a very old-school entertainment world, long before Mayberry. He had worked in vaudeville, dance, Broadway, film, and television, often with his wife Grace, building the kind of performer's timing that came from live audiences, not just studio cameras. By the time he joined the show, he carried a lifetime of show business miles with him. Paul Hartman passed away in 1973 at the age of 69 after a heart attack. Emmett Clark remains part of Mayberry's later everyday rhythm, the handyman, the shop talk, the small repairs, and the feeling that a town is not only built by sheriffs and barbers, but by ordinary men keeping things running. Ellie Walker was played by Elinor Donahue at the age of 23. She was Mayberry's young pharmacist, smart, polished, and a little more modern than some of the town expected. Ellie brought a fresh romantic spark into Andy's early story, while also giving the town a woman who could stand behind a counter and hold her own. Elinor Donahue was already known to American families from Father Knows Best, so seeing her in Mayberry gave viewers a familiar kind of TV warmth. Her career later moved through The Odd Couple, The Beverly Hillbillies, Dr. Quinn, Medicine Woman, and many guest roles, keeping her connected to several generations of classic television. Now 89, Elinor Donahue remains one of the few living links to the show's earliest days. Ellie Walker's time in Mayberry was short, but she left behind the feeling of a first romantic possibility for Andy. Sweet, capable, and just modern enough to shake up the town a little. Deputy Warren Ferguson was played by Jack Burns at the age of 31. He was the nervous deputy who stepped into Barney's old space, which was never going to be an easy job. Warren had his own jittery, over-talking energy, but Mayberry fans knew right away that replacing Barney Fife was a tall order for anybody. Burns had a strong comedy background outside Mayberry, especially through stand-up and his partnership with George Carlin. He later became involved behind the scenes as a writer and producer, including work connected to The Muppet Show, proving his comedy brain stretched far beyond one difficult sitcom replacement role. He passed away in 2020 at the age of 86 after respiratory failure. Warren Ferguson is remembered as the man who had to follow a legend, and that is a tough legacy. Still, his brief time in Mayberry shows how hard the show tried to keep its courthouse comedy alive after Barney left. Judd Fletcher was played by Burt Mustin at the age of 77. He was one of Mayberry's old-timers, the kind of familiar face who made the town feel like it had been sitting there for 100 years before the cameras arrived. Judd did not need a big entrance. He brought front porch age, dry humor, and that small-town feeling of men who had seen everything twice. Mustin's career is a wonderful oddity because he became famous late in life, when most performers would have already disappeared from the business. He showed up across classic television again and again, playing old neighbors, grandfathers, townsmen, and sharp little comic parts with perfect timing. He made being elderly feel lively, not sleepy. Burt Mustin passed away in 1977 at the age of 92, with no widely reported cause of death. Judd Fletcher's legacy is that gentle background richness he gave Mayberry. The sense that every bench, street corner, and courthouse chair had an old story sitting in it. Martha Clark was played by Mary Lansing at the age of 50. She was one of those Mayberry women who helped fill the town with church meetings, neighborly visits, and small conversations that made the place feel real. Martha was not a loud comic character, but she belonged to the everyday rhythm of a community where everyone noticed everyone. Mary Lansing worked in the steady, dependable world of character acting, where a performer could help build a town without always standing in the spotlight. On the Andy Griffith Show, faces like hers mattered, because Mayberry was never just Andy, Barney, and Opie. It needed townspeople who made the streets, shops, and social gatherings feel lived in. Mary Lansing died in 1988 at the age of 77, with no widely reported cause of death. Martha Clark remains part of that quiet Mayberry fabric. The neighbor in the room, the woman at the gathering, the familiar presence that helped make the town feel like a place viewers could actually visit. Hotel Detective Bardoli was played by Alan Melvin at the age of 39. He brought a different flavor from Mayberry's usual soft courthouse humor, more suspicious, more city hotel energy, and a little sharper around the edges. Bardoli was the kind of character who could make a simple misunderstanding feel more official than it really needed to be. Alan Melvin had the perfect old TV utility. Funny, sturdy, and instantly recognizable even when the role changed. He later became known to millions through The Brady Bunch, All in the Family, and voice work and animation, including Magilla Gorilla. He was one of those actors who seemed to pop up everywhere, and always knew exactly what kind of laugh the scene needed. Alan Melvin passed away in 2008, at the age of 84 after cancer. Bardoli may be a smaller stop in his career, but it shows what made Melvin valuable. He could walk into a scene, give it weight, suspicion, or comic bite, and then leave viewers feeling like they had seen that face forever. Johnny Paul Jason was played by Richard Keith at the age of 12. He was one of the Mayberry kids who helped the town feel like more than courthouse talk and adult problems. Children like Johnny Paul gave the show its schoolyard side, the small lessons, little mistakes, and innocent trouble that made Opie's world feel real. Richard Keith was already familiar to many classic TV viewers as Little Ricky on I Love Lucy, so his Mayberry appearance carried that same early family television charm. He had the natural ease of a child performer who did not feel too polished or forced. Later, he moved more toward music and life outside constant TV attention. Today, at 76, Richard Keith's story gives fans a rare look at what happened to one of those young faces from Mayberry's childhood world. Johnny Paul Jason was not a major character, but he helped show the town through a kid's eyes, where school, friendship, and one small mistake could feel like the biggest thing in the world. Arnold Bailey was played by Sheldon Collins at the age of 11. He was one of Opie's young friends, Part of that little Mayberry kid circle, where a simple dare, argument, or lesson could turn into a full story. Arnold helped make childhood in Mayberry feel active, not just something happening in the background. Sheldon Collins appeared during an era when family television often used children to tell gentle moral stories without making them too heavy. His work on The Andy Griffith Show fit that style well. Believable, quiet, and natural enough to feel like a real boy living down the street from Opie Taylor. Currently, at 71, Sheldon Collins remains interesting to fans because Arnold Bailey represents the younger side of Mayberry. The adults had the courthouse, the barbershop, and the front porch, but the kids had school books, friendships, little fears, and growing up moments that gave the town another layer of life. Townsman was played by Tom Jacobs at the age of 57. His role was small, but faces like this helped Mayberry feel populated beyond the main cast. A man standing nearby, passing through a scene, or joining the local background could make the town feel less like a set and more like a real community. Tom Jacobs had a special connection to the show because he was Andy Griffith's real-life manager and appeared in several small roles. That gives his presence a nice behind-the-scenes flavor, almost like someone from Andy's actual working life briefly stepped into Mayberry and became part of its streets. Tom Jacobs passed away in 1976 at the age of 72, with no widely reported cause of death. His townsman role was never meant to carry a big scene, but for fans who rewatch closely, even a small face can become part of the comfort. Another local in the crowd, another quiet piece of Mayberry. Joe Waters was played by Robert McQuain at the age of 26. He was one of those smaller Mayberry characters who helped the town feel wider than the sheriff's office and the Taylor home. Even brief faces mattered in this show, because Mayberry worked best when it felt like a place full of neighbors, visitors, and local stories. Robert McQuain did not become one of the widely remembered names from the series, but that fits the nature of many Mayberry appearances. The show depended on familiar townspeople and passing characters who could step into a scene, support the main story, and make the community feel busy without stealing the whole episode. He passed away in 1999 at the age of 65, with no widely reported cause of death. Joe Waters remains a small part of the Mayberry crowd. Not a headline role, but one of those names that reminds dedicated fans how many little pieces had to come together to make the town feel alive. Townsman was played by Joseph Crehan at the age of 77. His part was small, but he carried the look of old Hollywood character acting into Mayberry's gentle world. A face like his could make a street, shop, or courthouse scene feel fuller, as if the town had older stories sitting quietly in the background. Joseph Crehan had a long screen career before his Mayberry appearance, often playing officials, judges, businessmen, and men of authority. He was one of those reliable actors audiences had seen for years, even if they did not always know his name. In Mayberry, that seasoned presence added a little extra weight to even a simple townsman role. Joseph Crehan passed away in 1966 at the age of 82 after a stroke. His townsman role was not built around big comedy, but for viewers who love classic television faces, he brings a touch of Hollywood history into Mayberry. One more reminder that even the smallest roles can carry a long career behind them. Mayor Pike was played by Dick Elliott at the age of 74. He was Mayberry's early mayor, a round, official-looking presence who helped give the town its civic shape. Around Andy and Barney's courthouse world, Mayor Pike made Mayberry feel like a real little municipality, with meetings, local decisions, and small problems treated like big business. Dick Elliott had spent decades playing judges, mayors, newspapermen, and other authority figures across film and television. He had the perfect old-town face for someone who looked important, even while the situation around him stayed funny. In Mayberry, that made him feel less like a guest and more like a man who had always belonged there. He passed away in 1961 at the age of 75, with no widely reported cause of death. Mayor Pike remains part of the show's earliest texture, a civic voice from the black and white beginning, when Mayberry was still finding its rhythm, its faces, and the quiet charm that would make it last. Townsman was played by Joseph Hamilton at the age of 61. His role was small, but Mayberry needed faces like his to feel like a real North Carolina town. Not every local had to deliver a famous line. Sometimes just being present in the courthouse, on the street, or inside a town scene helped the world feel lived in. Joseph Hamilton came from that older generation of screen performers who often filled films and television with dependable character work. On a show like The Andy Griffith Show, that kind of presence mattered, because the charm was never only in the stars. It was also in the little local faces that made Andy's town feel crowded with ordinary lives. Joseph Hamilton passed away in 1965 at the age of 66, with no widely reported cause of death. His townsman role remains one of those tiny Mayberry details that close fans appreciate. A brief appearance, a familiar older face, and another quiet piece of the town's early black and white rhythm. Townsman was played by Roy Engel at the age of 49. He was another one of Mayberry's background locals, the kind of man who helped fill out the streets, meetings, and small public moments around Andy and Barney. In a show built on community, even a simple townsman could help make the place feel real. Roy Engel was a steady character actor whose face appeared across westerns, dramas, crime shows, and classic television for decades. He often played officials, doctors, officers, and practical men, bringing a grounded presence that did not need a big spotlight. In Mayberry, that same steadiness fit naturally into the town's everyday atmosphere. Roy Engel died in 1980 at the age of 67, with no widely reported cause of death. His townsman role may be brief, but it belongs to the larger Mayberry feeling, a town made from courthouse regulars, passing locals, and background faces that help turn a TV set into a place viewers still want to visit. Opie Taylor was played by Ron Howard at the age of 6. He was Andy's little boy, the red-haired child learning about honesty, kindness, disappointment, and growing up under the gentle eye of Mayberry. Opie gave the show its emotional center, because every lesson Andy taught him also seemed meant for the audience at home. Ron Howard grew up in front of America, moving from Opie to Richie Cunningham on Happy Days before becoming one of Hollywood's most successful directors. His later work behind the camera, including major films and award-winning projects, made his career one of the rare child star stories that kept expanding instead of fading. Now 72, Ron Howard gives Mayberry fans a living bridge between old television innocence and modern Hollywood achievement. Opie still matters because he represents childhood seen with patience, fishing trips, hard lessons, small tears, and a father who always tried to explain the world before judging it. Mayberry may be gone, but its kindness, humor, and unforgettable characters still live on. Thank you for watching. Share which cast member you remember most. And don't forget to like and subscribe for more classic TV stories.